Thank you.
Not the traditional.
5 p.m. I think we'll get started with introductions, and then any latecomers, I'm pretty sure they'll be able to catch on. And then, of course, just a reminder, we are recording this. So yeah, let's get started. I'm gonna pull up my doc here. Awesome. So welcome everyone on this fine and dreary Tuesday afternoon here in Connecticut. I know so many are joining us from all over the world, and we have Australia in the house too, so welcome. Today's topic on our fireside chat for the Cybersecurity Marketing Society is around creating engaging content that excites the security audience. And all of us cybersecurity marketers, we all know we struggle to figure out what is going to excite them, what's going to stop them when they're strolling through their LinkedIn feed, and what's going to get them to open that email from us vendors. I'm so excited today. I'm so excited to have two people that are going to bring us all the answers to these questions.
No pressure.
In the house today, we have CyberWire's finest, and definitely finest. We have Rick Howard, who is a CSO and Chief Analyst of the CyberWire, and Bennet Mo, who is the Head of Business Development and Operations from CyberWire. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for lending us your post 5 p.m. time, family time, to answer some of our pressing questions here on the cybersecurity marketing side.
You're very welcome.
So thank you so much. I'll give you maybe a minute or two to introduce yourselves a little bit more about what you do on at the CyberWire.
Go ahead, Bennett.
All right, Bennet Mo, as Maria said, I lead ad operations and business development here at the CyberWire. And that is, in our organization, that's very closely aligned with the sales, ad ops, and marketing side of our business are all very closely aligned. So everything that I do touches not only the sales and ad ops side, but also the marketing side.
So I'm Rick Howard. I'm the Chief Security Officer and Chief Analyst for the CyberWire. Been here just going on a year. There's two sides to the company, right? There is free content that is ad supported, and then there's the other side, which is subscription, kind of like a Netflix model. And that's kind of, I straddle both sides. The CyberWire does a number of podcasts and essays and webinars and other things. I produce one podcast on the subscription side called CSO Perspectives, and I help with another one that's on the ad side called Word Notes. Okay, and so that's kind of what I do.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much. This is the perfect two subject matter experts that we would need for the kind of questions we have lined up. And just some housekeeping items for our audience here. We want this to be an interactive chat, so use the chat box or use the Q&A box also to submit any questions you have for both Bennet and Rick throughout the whole session. You don't have to wait to the end. This way we can ultimately just chat with you and make it as interactive as possible. But I do have some questions lined up for both of you. And we're going to kick it off actually with Rick. This is for our security friends here that we're trying to sell to so much with lots of love. So as a security professional, what are the most trusted sources of news for you? Putting aside your CyberWire job hat and just as a security professional, really.
Well, I wouldn't even say the sources that I go to, right? It's more about how can I consume it, okay? Well, what I really love about cybersecurity is it changes all the time. You know, it's always some bad guy doing some nefarious but kind of cool but, horrible thing, and some white hat trying to figure out how to stop them from doing that. And so I love that about the job. What I hate about the job is it's changing all the time. There's always some black hat doing something. There's always some white hat doing something. And so keeping up with the Joneses on what is the current state is very difficult. So I need to be able to receive information in a very consumable way. And for me, I do that in a number of methods. Okay, I've been a podcast listener for long before they even had the name podcast, because I can do it while I'm walking the dog, and when I'm doing laundry, and when doing chores around the house, so I can keep up that way. I also like long form reading. Okay, so any kind of cybersecurity books that can really dive into the topic is something I prefer. And I also want to advocate not just cyber. Okay, you need to get news in other areas of the world that helps you kind of round out your professionalism. So it isn't just a bunch of cyber geeks talking about cyber geek things. It's really how the big news portals like the New York Times and the Washington Post and others talk about security. So I think I walked around the question, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I think the one of the things that you kind of allude to is getting outside of your own bubble, and we kind of have a natural tendency to do that, especially within social media. And if we can make an effort to get news and information outside of our usual sources, within our closed group, I think we'll be more well-rounded and better prepared to take on the challenges that these careers entail.
That's true. That's true. It's always trying to find that nice media mix, right? And I think from a marketer's perspective, we immediately go to those cybersecurity media outlets because we know for a fact we're going to reach our audience. Whether the audience is going to engage with our content, that's the other question. But we know for a fact, and especially for those startups with a very limited budget, going to those other national, media outlets or national news outlets sometimes can be unattainable because you're just like a small little fish in that big sea, or you just don't have the budget for it. So yeah, that's really, really interesting.
I also think that it needs to. I keep talking about consumable. Okay, the latest. What happened with the pandemic, all the cybersecurity podcasts out there, it's basically two guys and a dog talking for an hour and a half. And I've lost interest in that completely. Okay. I don't want to listen to that. It needs to be very short, get to the point, and so I can consume other things that are important. And we try to do that at the CyberWire.
Yeah, actually, I think it's worth noting that Rick was a consumer of our content before he was a member of the team. For many years, was a consumer of the content, and then was also a partner of ours when he was at Palo Alto. But that is kind of the model that we've taken. That we try to keep it brief, so because we know that people are very busy. They don't have a whole lot of time to consume a lot of information. So everybody's information stack is a little bit different. And as much as you can keep it lean with the stuff that really matters and keep the information that you make for those people, information that is going to matter to them, to what they do in their job, to make them more intelligent, make them make better decisions. That's what we try to do. And I think that's the kind of content that really resonates with folks.
That's true. And I think we're going to get to this in a few questions. But yeah, I think the pandemic got us thinking a little bit differently about what to do from a content marketing perspective too, here on the marketing side, especially since we spend a good chunk of our budget and time putting together these long form pieces of content that we only could hope are actually going to be consumed in entirety, and that our audience is going to like it. So I would only imagine that I think this would excite other marketers out there to say, no, long form is great, but give me the little bites and important things. That would make our life and our job so much easier. So.
Well, you make a good point. I think one of the things we try to do at the CyberWire too is make a smaller bit of consumable bite, and then point them to the long form if they are interested in it, right? So you can get more of the audience in the short stuff, and if they really want the long stuff, there's a place for that too.
Yeah, 100%. All right, cool. So I think this will be an interesting question to hear your thoughts on. But when you're evaluating a new security tool, and this is for you, Rick, again, what do you rely on in terms of vetting those vendors? Is it mostly peer-to-peer, or what are some of the other sources that you go to?
Yeah, I don't go to a vendor first, okay, to see what's going to happen, right? And the other thing too is people like me, we're trying to solve problems. right? And so we're not trying to say, let me have a tool that will do something. What I really have is a problem that I'm trying to fix. And I may be able to use a number of vendor tools to do it, or I may not. I may be able to get it done with, policy or people. And so I'm kind of thinking it at a higher level. So when vendors pitch their ideas, and I was in my last job, I was the chief security officer for a vendor, Palo Alto Networks. I would be in charge of going out and talking to customers, right? And it'd be talking about their strategies and help them solving problems. And then at the end of that, we can say, well, what should I buy? And you can hand them to a salesperson to sell them the widget that we had to sell. But it should be kept at a very, very high level, and so they can get their job done, so they are not struggling as much as all the network defender community is.
Yeah, and that's that process is really about building trust.
Yeah,
so you're building trust with the people that you're talking with, and that's what we've done with our audience. And it's kind of a little bit of a different kind of approach. But we, as a content that we build, that we have a certain strategy of doing that as being very content driven, not advertorial, not high sells. And that's even carries over to the kinds of ads we run with our sponsors. But it's really about building that trust with your audience, and that's from the kinds of content that you build. You can build that trust by using having that kind of consultative approach, creating content that's making people smarter, so that they are more powerful in their organizations.
And one way they can help do that is you get practitioners in there with your marketing offerings, right? As opposed to just marketing people or just salespeople. Those folks are all valuable. But if you can bring in someone who's been a security person, and at some point in their lives, they have an instant gravitas. So when they walk into a customer and say, "Hey, I understand. I feel your pain. I've been there. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?" That helps you take it across the line.
Yeah, for sure. Gianna said, "Don't lie. They're way less valuable."
I was trying to be nice. Okay.
No, but you know what? This was actually part of the big reason why we decided to start the Cybersecurity Marketing Society, because you have marketers coming into cybersecurity with no technical knowledge or background, and it's really, really hard. You're expected to hit the ground running within your first couple of months and start marketing a product you don't even understand how it's built or what it's built for. So the point of having a community like this is to learn from each other and share and collaborate, so we can understand and mentor those new marketers into what cybersecurity is. Yeah.
You make a great point there. If you're a new marketer coming into the cybersecurity space, don't try to be the expert in the room, because you're not going to be. Right. Latch yourself to somebody who is, right, and have them teach you as much as possible, but use them as the face. All right. And then you can learn through osmosis and then eventually get there. But, figure out how to use a practitioner in your offer.
Yeah, and use other resources that are out there. We've certainly heard that there are plenty of folks in the marketing departments that have their folks listen to or read CyberWire products or other security news publications just to learn the language, learn what the issues are, what are current, those types of things, just so you can get people up to speed faster. And then you don't want, like Rick said, you don't necessarily have to be the expert, but be able to understand what's being said and learn the language, and rely on the experts that you have at your disposal to really be for those finer points. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think marketers are agile enough to shift industries and products and hit the ground running as best as they can. But in cybersecurity, sometimes it is a little bit more.
Well, and I will say too that I've run into marketers who are pretty savvy when it comes to cybersecurity, but because they have marketing in their title, chief security officers are going to go, I don't want to talk to that guy or that woman. All right. So, it doesn't matter. So you have to kind of, work off that script. Absolutely.
I mean, I've seen people get really, really creative with their titles on LinkedIn anyway, just so they're not seen as that sales executive or that SDR or that marketing.
Yeah, use a description more than a title per se.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah,
that.
and that helps. That helps. So I have a question from the audience that I'd like to take, and this is from Ken. Are there specific topic areas you guys see as getting more traction from the industry, viewership or audience, or is it all over the board?
Go ahead.
You want to take that one? It actually is. Well, it ebbs and flows with issues. Certainly now, election security is top of mind. Work from home is still a fairly robust topic. There are still emerging issues with threats around those areas, but it does ebb and flow. Rick, what's your take?
Well, I'm going to go be contrarian there. You know, yes, we've been talking about working from home security since the pandemic started, but every podcast and every webinar has talked about that. Okay, so maybe that's not the first topic you put on the agenda, right? Just acknowledge that it's still there and move on to something more interesting. I think we've covered some of those topics to bits. The election that we at the CyberWire, you know, as everybody did, pinned, you know, election security is the thing everybody's going to be talking about until after November. Mm-hmm. But I would say, and this is just me, I have a real pet peeve about this. I am not excited about the latest ransomware thing that happened. Okay, there's so many of them that's not what gets my juices flowing. What does interest me is anything new that we can say is different from what it's been going on, you know, up until now. Those kinds of things, and I think my peers are that way also.
That's okay. That's definitely an interesting point of view because
you could say Rick is he's crazy. Okay, so
no,
it's okay
because it's really hard to stand out as a vendor in cybersecurity because really every vendor truly believes they're bringing something new to the market, something that hasn't been done before. So that new thing that you're looking for is what everybody's claiming they're bringing. And so it's rising above that noise and saying, no, really, what we're saying is really the new thing.
Well, I will tell you that the thing that used to work like 5-7 years ago was that whatever your vendor was, we had the best shiny object that's out there compared to all the other shiny objects. Our shiny object is better. That's not really what we're looking for these days because I don't want another shiny object that I have to manage. What I want is something that works, does what it says it does, and integrates with all the other shiny objects that I had, and I don't have to do any extra work. If you can pitch those kind of stories, those would be very valuable.
I like that. Well, Gianna, there goes your answer to your story, to your question. She asked, what else do you look for in stories for the CyberWire? So maybe this is something that you can answer, Bennet, from, you know, an ad operations side of things. I don't know if that includes any of the editorial team on the CyberWire, but what are some of the stories that will get your attention?
Yeah, in the types of things that we do in our daily podcast, it really is the stories that we think are the top things that leaders in the industry need to know that day, since that's a daily publication. For our interviews, in every show we have 2 interviews, a partner interview and a guest interview. We bring partners on with folks that we've known for a long time, that are leaders in the industry, that have something substantive to say, and we rely on them for commentary on a regular basis. And then for guests, we're looking for folks that have something interesting to say, and also very substantive. We look at substantive content. We generally record in advance, so we're not generally looking at breaking news. So we try not to chase the latest thing. We try to give well-reasoned approaches to the content that we're doing. So we try to do it that way. And then within our other shows are very topical. Our Caveat show is about cyber law and policy and private data, digital data privacy, hacking humans and social engineering, and then we have a couple short form podcasts, Career Notes and Word Notes, that are a little bit that are less newsy and more informational. But yeah, we look at content, and it's the stories, the personalities, the who we're talking to that are really going to bring value to the folks that are in our audience.
That's really cool to know. I want to follow up with a few more questions. Wow, we are getting amazing engagement for the audience. So I'd like to take some of their questions while they're still up and not asleep, which I don't imagine they would. This is such an exciting panelist lineup. So about press releases, and I think this is another one for you, Bennet. Are press releases dead? And how could we make news sexier? This is from one of the audience.
No, press releases aren't dead. I think there's still a place for those. We certainly will include press releases for instance, in our daily briefing. We put additional reading sections in links in our in the daily briefing, and that's generally where we'll put press releases about business oriented or product oriented types of things. We still use press releases ourselves. As a matter of fact, we just had a press release go out today or yesterday, I think it was today, about a new partnership we have with Verizon. So I think there's still a place for those to make announcements that gives you something to point to. Certainly from on the news side, it can be the launching point for telling a bigger story.
Yeah, awesome. Ken says, thanks for including my press release, guys.
Yes, well, yeah, we like to support other folks in the business too.
Cool. All right, I'm going to take one more question from the audience. This is from the Q&A section, and then we'll go back to our regular programming and my grilling questions that I have for you guys.
Where were you on the night of the 30th? Yeah.
I have my spotlight ready. So this one is about your podcasts. The question is, can you share the evolution of the podcast and your offerings? I know you're doing serialized shows, different types of podcasts, adding in new business line with paid only content. What made you start thinking about switching it up and evolving your content?
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of a history. We started as the CyberWire started as a newsletter briefing about 8 years ago, as a content marketing piece for a cyber company, and it got its own legs and became its own product, and then ultimately some bright person said, "Hey, this would make a great podcast." So 4 years ago, we launched the CyberWire Daily Podcast, and that eventually became its own company. It got its own voice. We're always looking to add new content to what we do. The fundamental, the basis of what we've always believed with the kinds of content that we produce is that we want to create content that is substantive and informational and educational. We really want to be able to keep our listeners up to speed and aware about everything that's going on in the industry, from new technologies to emerging threats across the board. We have evolved our model a little bit. That is still very much our fundamental approach, is that we are about content. We're not the kinds of content that we produce are not advertorial or pay to play. The interviews that we do are all based on the merit of the conversation that we're having, not on how much someone paid for it. We have changed up a little bit. We have a couple of opportunities where the sponsors can participate in. We have one called CyberWire X. That's kind of a hybrid model where we'll do an editorial front end and then have the sponsor have an interview at the end. And then we have on our career notes, a sponsor can have one of their people tell their story. The career notes is about someone telling their career story. But really, we're about developing the really high value content. And that's what we've done is built a lot of trust with our audience. And that's the kind of thing that's allowed us to, right now we're at about 250,000 unique listeners a month across our network. So we're constantly looking at what else can we bring to the market, either more broadly within the CyberWire Daily Podcast umbrella, which that podcast feed actually now consists of 3 separate podcasts. It's the CyberWire Daily Research Saturday, which is a research specific podcast, and then Career Notes airs in that feed as well. And then our CyberWire X is an occasional about monthly show that airs there as well. But we're adding new shows since the pandemic started. We've added 3 new shows, including Rick's show, CSO Perspectives, which is one that's behind the firewall, and that is a purely informational show. That's not an ad-supported show. That's purely behind within our CyberWire Pro platform.
Well, if you talk about the evolution of just podcasts, when they first started 10 years ago or however long ago it was really just one person behind a microphone talking. That eventually moved to interview shows, and interview shows have really come out of the woodwork during the pandemic. You can get interviews from everybody now. One of the things we're trying differently on my podcast is trying to make a 60-minute show for a podcast. So instead of one person interviewed, you interview 5 or 6, and then cut it so that it's all of them talking about this one subject, and it makes it much more compelling. So we are trying to elevate the genre here.
Right. Yep, exactly.
So this evolution really depended on you and the CyberWire team just listening to the feedback you're probably getting from your audience.
Yep, absolutely. And that includes the kinds of ads we run too. The ads that resonate with our audience are the ones that flow with the content that they're, and we do host read ads only, and that's intentional because it flows with the content. The ads that tell a bit of a story that, so you're not going to hear things like, ads for My Pillow or something like that in our podcast. We try to keep it all relevant so that people aren't, don't skip over the ads. And that's the one thing about podcasting that we found is that people have a tendency not to do that because they're listening to it while they're doing other things. So we've tried to evolve the medium, evolve with the medium, and evolve the medium, like building our own types of content and listening to the audience and the folks. We get a lot of feedback from our audience about the kinds of feedback they'd like to see and the kind of content they want to hear and read. We try to build that into the new content that we're building.
For sure. Gianna has a new suggested name for the next podcast for CyberWire. It's called My Cyber Pillow today.
There you go.
I'm totally in, as long as she's my guest host. Okay, so I don't know what it's about, but it sounds
a host job.
Got the job, Gianna. All right, so well, back to our regular programming. So, and also back to the hot topic of what type of content. Really, what type of content do you most consume? Is it blogs? Is it podcasts? I know you already covered this, Rick, that you do listen to podcasts in long form, like in books. But do you have any interest in webinars and fireside chats like these and blogs? And if you do, what have been some of your favorites throughout your security career?
Yeah, like I said before, I'm a big consumer of podcasts and also essays online if they're a subject that I'm interested in. All right. But for webinars, it depends on who's in there. If I know the person and I respect them, then I'll probably join. Or if I've heard of the person and they're talking about a subject that I'm interested in, I would definitely tune in. But if it's, 2 guys and a dog and their best friend, probably not, if I don't, especially if the subject is not interesting. It's all about content, Eric. Really, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that, and there's certainly an opportunity too with webinars in particular, with aligning with partners. You don't always have to go it alone with these things. Case in point.
That's true.
So if you have a partner who has aligned interests, you can amplify both audiences through that. My consumption patterns are a little bit different than Rick's. I read less long form than he does. I'm kind of the quick bite guy. I'm kind of a victim of social media. Maybe that's reduced my attention span. But I was working for the CyberWire. It kind of goes with the territory that I'm a podcast consumer. So I definitely get a lot of information through podcasts. I do like webinars. The webinars that I gravitate towards are the ones that are subject matter specific, aligned with the pain points that I'm experiencing, or are the ones that are generally of information that I find interesting. Either it's aligned with my role or with my company's focus, or a personal interest. But I think the pandemic has kind of changed those patterns a little bit for me, especially. There was, and I don't want to preempt another question, but it certainly has changed a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's changed a lot of things for us on the marketing side too. I know myself, I was experimenting with creating new types of shorter form content where You create like what I called it a 2-minute white paper, which is basically taking your best performing blog post, adding some backed research stats, and just calling it a 2-minute white paper, and really make it a 2-minute read.
Yeah. And give the opportunity for someone to dive deeper if they have the interest.
I do that all the time, right? In fact, I recommend to newbies coming into the profession that they should practice writing and speaking, right? And they could write a really long form paper on some subject and then write the executive summary and post it on LinkedIn and say, if you're interested, go to the bigger long form thing. So yep. I totally advocate for that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So I think the consensus is long form is not dead.
Right.
Not by a long shot.
Preferred as a step 2.
Yes. Yeah. It's a stage 2 thing. That's right.
We're getting some pretty good insight here. All right. So yes, Bennet, thank you for leading us right into this question in terms of how the pandemic has changed some of our behaviors in consuming media and even in actually producing content in general. So what have been some of your most notable changes, and what are some of the things that you think are going to actually stay permanent? Like, this is the new way of you doing certain things.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what does become permanent. You know, certainly the biggest impact was in live in-person events, that they totally stopped entirely and are very slow to come back. And I think that's going to carry on for quite a while. And we saw from our ad ops side of the business is that people were reallocating their funds. It's like, okay, we're not spending the big dollars on going to Black Hat or RSA or whatever. Of course, RSA was right at the beginning, so you didn't get to save any money there. But how is that money being reallocated? How are people consuming the content, and what are they doing to replace it? Because a lot of the conversations and the things that we're doing in webinar form now are things, I think Rick, we were talking about this the other day, the kinds of things that they would have done at these in-person events. So are webinars a one-to-one replacement for that? Of course they're not, but those types of things I think these virtual events are here to stay. To a certain extent, it expands the audience because it opens up to people that wouldn't be able to attend an in-person event. The other side of that coin is there are a lot of them. So, as you say, you have to create content that stands out.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too. You would go to security professionals might go to 1, maybe 2 conferences a year. And we would, in our mind, we would say, that's where I'm going to go and catch up from all the things I haven't been reading this past year, right? And since we're not doing that, these webinars have popped up, but there's so many that it's tough to pick and choose which ones you attend. And I don't have an answer for this, but the other big component to conferences that we're not getting with like these Zoom meetings is the social bit. Most of the conferencing is, let's go have a beer and talk about some stuff. And we're not getting that now. And I don't have an answer for that. Maybe these are the right way, but tough to drink a beer in Zoom.
I will give out a shout out for you, Maria. I think that the summit that you did a couple of weeks ago actually took a really good stab at that. So the social part of a webinar / summit type of thing with the breakout room. So there are some evolving ways to kind of try to build that social aspect into it. But it's an adaptation. It's certainly not a one-to-one.
Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, us marketers, we love to get creative with certain things. And yeah, we're finding new ways to call a webinar not a webinar, much like this fireside chat.
Exactly. Yeah. There's certainly going to be a certain an amount of webinar fatigue. So positioning things differently, calling them different things, and actually doing the kind of run of show a little bit differently to keep things interesting is going to be a point of innovation going forward. I think it'll be interesting to see what the next evolution of these types of events are.
Well, I tell you one thing that's happening to me personally about this is that I've signed up for a couple of webinars, the whole day kind of thing. But as the day got closer, my day kept getting filled with other things. So I can't go, right? So you would go to conferences to get away and, spend time on something. So maybe shorter events, not all day events, but we're going to
Yep.
talk about this one subject and be done with it. I don't know.
Yeah, people have so many demands on them that's exactly right, Rick. When you're away at a conference, you can focus on the conference. When you're sitting at your desk at a webinar or a virtual summit, you still have that other screen staring at you that has the email ding and your Slack channels, is getting hit. And
not to mention my dogs want to be walked. I mean, so
right. Yep.
Sure.
Although that is one of the things that I kind of liked about this, this era is that, I'm using a virtual background, but the number of kids and dogs and things that have popped into meetings have really made them much more personal.
Yeah, acceptable too. It's okay now to have dogs.
Exactly. So I think that is actually kind of changes those little kind of subtleties can change the tenor of a conversation. That creates a much more personal atmosphere, then you can have a really engaging conversation that way on a level that you may not get at a conference.
Yeah. I think that even though the pandemic has disconnected us in many ways, it at the same time really brought us together in many other ways, just like you said. And people don't mind kids hopping in the background or
prefer it. Break it up.
Yeah, exactly. It keeps it human, and at the end of the day, that's what we try to remind ourselves as marketers is, okay, we are marketing to humans. We're not marketing to robots or companies. It's another human. So we try to think of that when we're putting together messaging and content. I think we are getting better at that in cybersecurity too. Getting away from that fear-based type messaging and just, look, we know you're the CISO that's crazed with a million tools in your tech stack and a team to manage. Here's what this tool can do for you. So, that's awesome. All right, let's see. What can we take from the audience? We have, what's your favorite outside of cyber podcast?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Ben and I listen to a lot of podcasts. My favorite one right now, the one that I look forward to, I got two right now, that's outside of cyber, is Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History. Whenever that pops into my feed, I'm stopping. I'm going to go walk the dog right then. I'm going to go listen to it. The one I'm enjoying entertainment-wise is HBO has a show called something, it's a horror. God, I can't think of the name of it now. I can't think of it. Cthulhu's in it. You know what I'm talking about, Bennet? I'll look it up here.
I don't think I know that one. I'm gonna have to check it out.
It is. Oh man, I'm looking. I just listened to the one. It's called Lovecraft Country.
Okay. Oh yes, okay, I know which one that
so is. It's but the podcast that goes with it, it's really about Black issues and things like that, and how the series is interweaving all that. It's really well done. So those are my two favorites right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I have a bunch in my scroll, but the ones that I listen to a lot is actually, one is a really short form podcast called Bird Note, which actually was a little bit of an inspiration for some of the short form podcasting that we're doing now.
It's true.
It's one of my potential career paths when I was a teenager was to be an ornithologist. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. So I guess I have an affinity for birds. And this show is it's a really quick hit. It's 2 minutes every day, gives you something interesting. It's always a nice little story. So I like that one. Longer forms, Choiceology, I find very interesting. It's Katie Milkman, and it's Charles Schwab it's their kind of house podcast, but it's not about investing. It's about the science of the choices that people make, and they have she weaves a very good story within that podcast. So I enjoy that one as well. And Make Me Smart is another good one if you like a daily.
I think I've heard
another 15-minute kind of quick hit, two news stories a day, which actually isn't unlike our format for Caveat and Hacking Humans, where we do kind of the same thing. We bring two stories and then have some dialogue and an interview, and that's kind of the same format. I don't think that it was intentional.
That's really cool. Not that anyone asked what favorite is, but I'm going to share it anyway. I've been addicted to this little app lately. It's called Blinkist, and not only does it have sort of, they call them blinks of an actual book. So they summarize the book into 50 blinks, and you can either listen to it or actually read it, which is amazing. For a busy mom like myself, it's great to, say that I'm reading, but reading blinks instead of, having time for a whole book.
Well, I have another one for you then. It's called, one of them is Bookmonger.
Oh, okay.
And another one's Great Books, and they just take books that you've heard about and they bring the author on, or they bring in somebody else and they talk about it. So if you're interested in that, it's good. Yeah.
Awesome. Make a note of that. Yeah, but they do these, Blinkist does these audio shows, one of which is Seth Godin. He does like a 2 minutes with Seth Godin every Tuesday and Thursday, and it's amazing. Those 2 minutes are so eye-opening and inspirational. I'm so addicted. And then they do these new shows that they started after the pandemic called Checking In. It's basically just checking in with people because everyone's so disconnected that you're checking in from a mental perspective and also just from different hot topics. There are a bunch of other ones, so that's what I love listening.
Well, if we can swing that back to the marketing message here, one thing marketers could do right now is just go through their Rolodex and just reach out. Don't try to sell anybody anything. Just say, hey, I know we're all in the mess, and just trying to see if you're still alive and if you need any help. That might go a long way.
100%. Yeah, make those LinkedIn messages a little bit more personal versus, oh, we have connections in common. I thought we'd connect.
Yeah,
oh.
Yeah, that's an immediate delete when I get that marketing message.
Yeah, don't approach me on LinkedIn and say, I was browsing the LinkedIn and came across your profile. Yeah, that one's not going to get very far.
All right, cool. So this is going to be a hot one. And us marketers, we spend a lot of time crafting this. Do you still believe in email? LOL is what I had at the end of that question. So Rick, from a security professional's perspective, do you still believe in email, and particularly email from vendors, not just
Yeah, I'm not going to answer an email from a vendor, okay, unless I've reached out to you first with a question. That goes with phone calls too, by the way. I'm not picking those up. So they're, to me, and I would say to most chief security officers, they're dead. Okay, you're not going to get in that way. You have to be more creative than that.
Wow. Okay, I can't get more real than that.
There you go.
We're all busy, and we don't have. If I didn't solicit a question from you, or if I didn't ask you something, then why would I spend time on something like that? I'm not using email to browse my next vendor.
Interesting. All right, email channel, not even with the most enticing subject line won't get you to open it.
Yeah, maybe if it's something that I'm thinking about right now, maybe, but it hasn't really worked in 10 years on me. Sorry, I know marketers don't want to hear that, but that's really, when all the CISOs get in a room at Black Hat, we laugh at the people that do that to us. So.
Wow, no, marketers want to hear this. This is great. This is exactly.
You need another way in. Something that they already know they're going to read.
And I see the question: would mailing me a box of cookies work? No. Okay, I'll eat the cookies.
Oh, it'll work for Dave Bittner. That actually does.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, actually, when was that? Was that in Hacking Humans? He talked about it a little bit. We did have a vendor email us a box of cookies with a QR code on it, and so that actually piqued his attention. Interesting enough that he actually talked about it on the show. So there are creative ways to.
Okay.
No. The challenge with something like that though is, where are people now?
Exactly.
Dave is the one person in our company who is actually in the studio.
Yeah.
Everyone else is working remotely. So, so okay, there you go. If you want to reach Dave, he's in the studio. You can mail him stuff there.
Well,
you mail it to us. He'll tell us about it and then eat it.
Well, I would say it's safe to say all marketers are now going to shift all of their swag budget to baking budget. Boxes of cookies everywhere.
Yeah, I like the Kenneth down there. 0 cent plus cookies plus a Tesla. Okay, that works. Okay,
there you go.
You might get my attention with a Tesla.
No, but you bring up a good point, Bennett. We actually had the same kind of challenge for the Cybersecurity Marketing Conference a few weeks ago, we did have swag, and we actually had to ask people for their home addresses if they wanted it. And, you know, a lot of attendees did send us their address, and we packed them up and sent a little swag bag. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really interesting, because we'd love to do some cool stuff as a vendor and give away things, but you know, nobody.
Yeah, we've had the same thing. You know, with conferences, we give away a ton of stickers, and we've even had, you know, it's come up in, like in LinkedIn, it came up in a conversation that someone had displayed, you know, their sticker board. They were putting their stickers on a piece of plexiglass, and I said, "Oh, you need a CyberWire sticker?" And she said, "Yes, I do." I said, "But where do I send it?" I'm not. You're gonna have to send me your address. So if anybody wants a sticker, send me their address. We'll send you some.
Yeah, follow up with us, and we'll definitely get that to you. Yeah, I think that was Emmy. She's actually part of our society. So and I saw our stickers too. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for that very candid feedback on email.
Sorry.
Email is or not. Marketers take note. All right, so I'll do one more question from the lineup, and then we'll go to the audience and see what they have to say. You know, well, this actually feeds perfectly into that email subject. What are 3 things you wish vendors would stop doing? And this actually could be a question for both of you, because Bennet, you also obviously have your clients as vendors.
Yep.
So it'd be nice feedback for them as well.
Go ahead, Rick. I'll feed off of what you say here.
Okay. I think we've covered most of this, but cold calls don't work because and here's the reason. I know sales guys don't like to hear that, but because they have no other avenues, but I'm working on something today. Okay. So if you call me and want to talk an hour about the thing that you're worried about, that just wastes my time. It makes me mad. So cold calls on the phone, unsolicited email, those 2 things do not work for me. And then I think Bennet mentioned this on LinkedIn. Okay, hey, we have people in common. We should be connected. That doesn't work for me either. Okay, here's the thing that does work for me. I noticed that you said something interesting about X on LinkedIn. I have a question about that. You know, and that'll get the conversation going. And then maybe you can sell me your product, but show some interest in what the person is about, not just trying to sell them something.
Love that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's if you want to have a substantive conversation, like actually, you know, show that you're, you know what I'm about, or what, you know, what if you reference something that I wrote or something that the company did, or, you know, something that's more than, you know, just give me 15 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
I don't know that everyone is quite as rigid as Rick is.
Yeah, I knew I was going to be in trouble when I started talking about this subject. So.
I think there are definitely shades of that. There's certain there are levels. I think with some people will pick up the phone, some people will look at emails, but you don't want to waste their time. That's the big thing, and if you have something that's substantive, don't waste a lot of their time. But if you have other ways to reach them and build that trust before you ever make that call, then they're much more likely to answer it or answer that email. So if you have marketing out there that you're building the brand awareness and having other ways, other touch points, it kind of creates a suite of touches there that you can build on.
100%. I really like that. I'm big advocate for just put in the work. Even from a sales perspective, you should be a marketer at heart, and become a thought leader and be out there contributing and getting your word known, so you can establish trust, so that when you reach out, your audience already knows you, they like what you say, and they'll give you that 30-second elevator pitch, a stage. All right, cool. So I would like to take a question from the audience, and I think Kelly sent in through the chat. She said recommendation can go far. How do you get your recommendations? And I'm going to assume recommendations on LinkedIn, Kelly, or
product recommendations,
or product
like peer-to-peer kinds of recommendations.
Oh, product, yes, and yeah, both.
Yeah, Rick, I'll let you take that one. That's
yeah. it's really interesting about the cybersecurity space is that most of us, most security practitioners already have the widget that a form of the widget that you're trying to sell us, right? So in my last job, we sold firewalls, right? Everybody on the planet has a firewall. So if you're going to win that business, you have to convince them to get rid of their current vendor and to bring on a new vendor, right? And that's really hard to do, especially, you know, we're 30 years into the cybersecurity market. Most of the stuff is commodity anyway, right? So what I am buying is trust with the vendor. And so I'm when I talk to CISOs around the world, I'm not saying, hey, does Checkpoint's firewall have really cool widgets? That's not what I'm asking about. I'm asking them, are the contracts fair? Are you getting customer support? Are they responsive to your needs? Do you like the direction they're taking the company? Those kinds of things are what I'm interested in terms of recommendations. I'm not buying a widget that does, you know, that, I don't know, has a laser beam in it or something. That's not what I'm interested in.
I like that. That's really good feedback, because yeah, like you said, you're placed in front of, you know, many similar products. It comes down to, sometimes it comes down to the people behind the product and
Yeah.
or that you're going to get after, and you're not just going to sign the contract and be forgotten, you know, no
Right.
longer part of that pipeline. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of these things, you know, they're expensive, right? And you're not going to buy them and then replace them in a year. You know, when you sign the bottom line or the dotted line, that's probably a 5-year commitment for any kind of large scale security product, right? So you have to trust in the people that you're doing business with.
Right. That's very true. All right. One more question from the audience, and thanks, Ken, for resurfacing that. Aileen had a question, and I think this one's going to be possibly for you, but maybe both. For you, Bennett, but maybe both. Have you been able to measure podcast subscribers against lead gen? And I think that's going to be a really interesting one for us marketers.
Yep.
Because yeah, we like to get a little bit of return on that investment, and so if we don't really have leads.
And how do you measure it? Yeah, podcasts, like any broadcast media, is tough in that regard. It's getting better though. There are some new technologies for us. We switched to a new platform this summer that allows us to put tracking pixels in the ads in our podcast. So depending on the vendor that you use, Chartable, for example, is one. They can put put the pixel in there, and then it does IP matching to match the IP of the download to the IP of someone visiting your site, so that you can correlate attribution that way. It's an imperfect science, so the results are, can be a little bit longer tail. The value of advertising in podcasts typically has a much longer tail. We've had sponsors of ours tell us that months after they've advertised, they've had someone come up to them at a trade show or something and said, "Hey, I heard you on the CyberWire, or heard your ad on the CyberWire." So those are the tail is much longer. There is a bunch of research, and I wrote a white paper, a short white paper on this. At the end of last year. I'm happy to share it with anyone who wants it. There's been some research about the retention in podcasts, and there was Podcast One and Edison Research did a presentation at the end of last year. I think it was about a year ago now, where they found that podcast listeners retained up over 4 times the brand recall than display ads. So, and a lot of that, it seems to kind of counterintuitive that a medium that allows you to do other things while you're listening would generate better recall, but it actually does. And for us, we've done our own research and have found that one of the things that we asked is where and when do you listen to podcasts, not just ours, but just podcasts in general. And it was, when people were commuting time was a big one, doing yard work, cooking, doing other things, but it's doing those things, going out for walks, exercising, things where they allow their body to do one thing and their brain to do another. So you're kind of using the two different sides of your brain. And it generates a lot more recall. And then the strategy that we've used there with host read ads has that implied endorsement. So we have the host who is talking in the show, he's presenting all the information and building that trust with the audience, is also the one who's reading the ad. So so we've had folks say, we had one of our the companies that we share space with in our studios was an advertiser or a sponsor, and they had someone come to them and say, hey, you know, I heard Dave talking about your company on the CyberWire. If you can do what he says you can do, then we need to talk. And he wasn't talking about, you know, I heard your ad. He was saying, I heard Dave talk about it. So so it's those kinds of things, those kinds of intangibles. So it's the attribution, kind of going back to the question. Attribution is tougher. It's not like you can track a link like you can in an email. So you're not getting a UTM. But there are strategies to doing it. You can what we have can certainly help on that front too. But if you're driving people to a white paper, you can measure form fills. If you're driving people if you're primarily focused on brand and you're driving people to your homepage, you can benchmark the traffic that you're getting to that website before, during, and after runs. Generally, like a lot of things, it's we intentionally don't do kind of one and done sponsor ads in our programming, and it's the same with really any advertising medium, is that consistent exposure, and even beyond advertising and just content generation in general. The more you get your brand and your message in front of your prospect, the people that you're trying to reach, the more they're going to grow comfortable with your brand and the message that you know, they're going to remember it. And even if they don't follow that link or go to your website right away, that'll be top of mind when they are thinking about that product, that service, that topic, and they do go to search for those types of things. And then, like I said, there's some really interesting research out there about those types of things that I'm happy to share.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's brand awareness at its finest, right? And we all know in marketing that brand awareness is more of a long-term strategy than short-term. And it's perfect, marriage of psychology and marketing. And I love that. That's amazing insight. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, it's just to add one more thing, more practical thing, especially during the pandemic, we see vendors trying to make their own podcasts as a way to generate interest in their brand. But if you're going to do that, know first that making a podcast is a lot more to it than you think. And the second thing is you should build some telemetry in to make so you can count how well your things are doing. Because if you don't, then you're just doing a lot of work and you won't know if you've made it any better, right? So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and if anyone is thinking about making their own podcast, happy to share some of our insights, offline, one-on-one, if folks are interested in that. Their podcasts are definitely a lot of effort. There's a common thing we call pod fade when you get about 5 episodes in, and then the organization realizes that the people making the podcast are also tasked with a lot of other things that they need to get done. Yep. And that they take priority. So the podcast priority kind of wanes a little bit. So that's something you have to really work to mitigate. Yeah,
absolutely. Especially in startups when you're the only marketing person in the marketing team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to get buy-in from, all up and down the organization chain, because if it's not supported by, marketing can have the best intentions of the world and have a really good plan, but if the folks that are approving the budgets and ultimately allocating the resources aren't bought in on it, then it's, you're not going to get too far.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're always having to prove and take that extra step to prove that this might not get you leads tomorrow, but it will in 6 or 9 months time, depending obviously on the sales cycle. But really getting leadership to believe in it is a much bigger task than actually starting a podcast, I believe, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I have a case study that I'm happy to share too from one of our sponsors about kind of how they built the justification for renewing that particular program. So
yeah, that would be amazing. So for all of our audience, everything that we or Bennet just covered, or any other resources that you both would like to share, definitely share it with me an email, and we'll do a follow-up with the link to the recording. Yeah, and we might even answer some of the questions that we didn't get to answer on the LinkedIn page or even via email. That's fine too. Thank you both so much. This has been amazing and so eye-opening.
You're very welcome. Yeah, happy to continue the conversation here, LinkedIn, Slack, wherever.
Yeah, would love that. Yeah, the summary is email is dead.
So says Rick.
Email is dead. Send cookies. Start a dog walking podcast. I think that's what I.
Yeah.
And cyber pillow
like
talk.
Cookies, yeah.
Okay.
You can, Gianna, or you can email me. Just don't email Rick.
He's not opening that email. Again, thank you both so much, and thank you to the CyberWire team. We love having you as partners. Amazing insight, and I think we can do more of these if you're willing to hop on with us.
Sure, absolutely.
So much more in those two brains that I'd like to pick off.
Just have the Tesla warming up in my driveway, and then
there you go.
Okay,
yep.
So.
Yeah, Teslas go a long ways.
You got it.
For
No
sure.
problem. All right. Thank you very much. The recording will be shared shortly on our LinkedIn page and YouTube. So, and come back for more firesides. Thanks for joining.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks,
See
everybody.
you guys. Thank you.